I was 26, he was 32. We just bought a house, we got engaged, and we were planning a wedding. Grant said to me, "You can decide that you don't want to do this journey with me." He helped me move through my fears of abandonment because my real dad killed himself when I was 5 years old. He was angry at me a lot. Grant would have moments of bringing me close and then pushing me away. Grant also had some good relationships with other caregivers who were females. I was jealous that he had this closeness with them and not with me. 3 months before he died, he told me he was going to divorce me. "I'm still here wiping your ass and I'm not going anywhere." I was in that phone call ready to check myself into Mahalona Psych Hospital because I had lost. I was ready to have a nervous breakdown and lose my mind.
It's hard to make it through life without mentorship.
I hope to God I never have to go through something that painful ever again.
A lot of us really lonely because we don't let people in when we need them.
Our marriage was falling apart. I went through my whole healing process, and then 7 years later, I found my next beloved. We are so much stronger than we know that we are.
Have you ever wondered what masculinity even is in the modern era? Do you want to move behind the macho bully or the soy boy archetype? I'm Mark Azulay, and this is the Men's Therapy Podcast. Together we'll explore how neuroscience, Jungian psychology, and Buddhist philosophy can transform your life, your marriage, and your business. Are you ready to deep dive into the minds of men? Let's begin.
Hello and welcome to the Men's Therapy Podcast. I'm here with Sheila Clemenson, and she is a coach. She does career coaching. She's a certified career coach, a grief wellness coach, and she has a company called Transitions Coaching Services. Sheila, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much, Mark. It's great to be here with you this morning.
Yeah, so I'm really happy to chat with you. One, because, we talk about men's mental health here, and career and job is a huge part of a lot of guys' lives. But two, you have a really personal story of going through grief, seeing your husband go through a terminal illness, and just being involved in a major life transition. So as we were talking before about what the show would be about, we decided to anchor it around what happens when your life falls apart, really. And I think a lot of guys listening may either are in that place or have experienced that place.
Yeah, I mean, it's devastating. The circumstances around our particular situation with my first husband were, I was 26, he was 32. We just bought a house, we got engaged, and we were planning a wedding. We were living in northern Michigan in Petoskey at the time, and Grant had been having some problems with coordinating his walking. So he'd been an avid skier. He thought maybe he skied his knees out. And, we started going through that process of going to different doctors and seeing what was happening. He ended up going to a neurologist after they found nothing at the orthopedic, specialist. And he came home from work when I was unpacking boxes one day, and he said, "The doctor thinks that I have one of these." And he put 2 pamphlets on the table. One was MS, the other one was ALS, known as Lou Gehrig's disease. And he said, they're difficult to diagnose, and the only way that you know is by progression of the symptoms. In that moment, the rug was pulled out from under us. We had the world by the tail. We were living a really fantastic life. My husband, Grant, was an international sales manager. He'd just been promoted from a European sales position. He worked for a company in northern Michigan called Lexalite International, and he got his dream job, right? He was working his dream job. I was professionally working as well, and, we just sat there really in shock, and initially, right, you're in shock and you're in denial and you're trying to figure this out and you're grieving. So we went through a lot of anticipatory grief through the process of really diagnosing what he had. While in the meantime, we're watching his physical symptoms progress, which ALS, if people aren't familiar with it, it's your nerves are dying and they're not feeding the muscles any longer. And so you lose the ability to do things on your own. That includes walking, using your hands. That includes when it goes internally, you lose the ability to swallow, to eat, to speak, etc. So It is, on my top 5 worst illnesses to die from. There are a lot of other ones up there, though, too. So when we knew that he was sick, Grant said to me, you need to know that this is what I'm going through, and you can decide that you don't want to do this journey with me, right?
Wow. Like right off the bat, like just saying you can leave if you want. Wow. That's a big moment.
I mean, we bought a house together. We were planning a wedding. We'd been together for 2 years, which included him living outside of Paris, me moving out there and being with him before we got engaged, etc. I mean, I was in it. I wasn't going anywhere. So I told him, I said, no, I'm going to walk this journey with you. And, and I did. I married him knowing that he was sick. So, you take those vows. And, I was really living that commitment. Slowly, he started losing the ability, and I started compensating for a lot of his, issues. Now, how could he still do an international sales job right while he was, progressing with this disease? He walked with the cane. Things were moving slowly. He had independent sales reps in all the different countries that he was going to. So once he got on a plane and got there, he was well taken care of. Okay. And he could still get around. He was just moving slower. So he just needed extra support, right? But they would. Somebody'd come and pick him up. They would wine and dine him. I mean, he was able to do that for a while, right? So this is the big thing. Grant did not want anyone to know in our community that he was ill. He did not want people treating him differently. He had worked his whole life for this international sales job, and he's like, I am not giving this up. I don't want to tell anybody. So we were living in a small town, about 10,000 people in the wintertime, that goes up to 30,000, 50,000 plus in the summertime because it's a very strong summer destination. It's up north of Traverse City, Michigan. So it's off Lake Michigan. It's beautiful. So I respected that, but, we had to keep it a secret. And keeping something so devastating a secret is really challenging.
Really challenging. Yeah. Were you able to get support at all? Because there's also your experience, right? Like as the caregiver and as someone who's seeing the man you love
Absolutely.
atrophy.
And I was gradually taking on more caregiving responsibilities over time, right? If he couldn't open a jar, I would open it. That's how it started, right? But then eventually it came to me helping him with using the bathroom and getting his pants down and different things like that, right? So, our family knew, some very close friends knew, but not really our friends in the community who he worked with because we didn't want anybody to know. So, yes, I got support through our immediate family, but not as much locally, right? I mean, yes, they could see that he was progressing and something was wrong, but he wasn't telling them he had a terminal illness, right? I mean, something's going on. I'm having it checked out. I don't know what it is. He was able to get away with that for a while, right? So for a couple of years, he got away with that. And, and then it came to a point where he's like, we need to think about doing an early retirement because I can't do this much longer. And so we phased out of our lives in northern Michigan. We moved to Hawaii, which you can say, how the heck can you do that? You're, 28 years old, 20 at the time, 29, and Grant was 34. It was in 1997. It was 5 years after Hurricane Iniki. That was a Category 5 devastating hurricane. Basically, the island was rebuilding. Grant had been going out there since he was 15 with his family who had timeshares. So we did have some friends on the island. We did have some structure when we got there. And we could rent a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home for $500 a month. Now, the law in Hawaii that was really fascinating was I worked for a friend's clothing business at the Marriott. I got full-time health insurance benefits working part-time because that was a Hawaii state law. So I made $8 an hour, but I got our full-time benefits. We took money out of our retirement. Fortunately, Grant had been doing well financially for quite a few years, so we were able to put some money away. But and then I just say you don't need a lot living on an island, sarong, flip-flops, bathing suit, Yes, it's very expensive to live there now. The same house would be $3,000 a month to probably rent, right? But at the time, it was feasible for us. Now, people will say, well, what about not having your family or different people? The space Grant held was, I want people to remember me healthy. I don't want people to remember me being debilitated and dependent and not able to care for myself. And, he was a bit vain from that perspective. So, this actually worked out really well for us. We were able to bring in caregivers who, they weren't your typical caregivers. They were like, we put an ad in the paper and surfer people showed up and, they became friends of ours. And, I might come home, Grant might be smoking a joint and going to the beach or something. It wasn't like, we had a caregiving service.
It was like medical. Yeah, it was just locals. Yeah.
It was locals coming in, helping them, feeding them, and some of our caregivers are still some of my best friends. So we had a wide variety of people coming in, but, it was the most bittersweet time because yes, we were together in the most beautiful place in my mind that we could possibly be. And he was dying. And our marriage was falling apart. And I had gained a dependent man-child, so to speak. And there's a lot of issues that I can talk to you about that. But, and he gained, a caregiver, a nurse. And if I could go back and do it over again, I would have been Grant's wife instead of his caregiver. And I would have fought for that because it really took its toll. So, and the beautiful part about it is I wrote a book, Over the Rainbow, From the Depths of Grief to Hope. We have our secret beach story that starts this book. And the reason why it's so special is because Secret Beach, which is on the North Shore in Kilauea, if people have been there, they know what it is. It's hard to get to. And Grant, when 2 months before he died, he had aspiration pneumonia in the ICU, and he asked me to take him there one more time before he died. It is also the beach that we got engaged on years before that. The only way to get to that beach is a very steep hike down a very slippery slope. And there was no way that I was going to get him down there. And all I could think was, I don't know how I'm going to get you down there. And my really good friend, Anna Christina, she is quite a magical little shaman. She was able to find a caretaker of 5 cattle ranch properties who got permission to open the gates for us to go down through private land to get to the beach. And I was able to make good on my final promise to him, getting him to Secret Beach one last time. And I talk about that story. I'm proud of it because it makes grown men cry. And basically, he died that day after I got him back home. And he died in my arms. And it was bittersweet and painful and beautiful at the same time. He was home with hospice for 2 months before he passed away. And so, I lived that journey with him for 3.5 years. We were married for 3.5 years. We were together for 7. And it's the thing that I'm the most proud of accomplishing in my whole life. And I hope to God I never have to go through something that painful ever again. So the book is about love and resilience and grief, but it kind of starts on the day after he dies. And the book goes 20 years into the future in rebuilding your life, meeting, dating, getting sober. I've been sober 18 and a half years, and I numbed myself a lot drinking after he died, right? I went through my whole healing process, and then 7 years later, I found my next beloved, and then went on that journey with Sean. So, it's a testimony to resilience and the power of moving forward, but the pain of moving forward. And I bring humor into the book because that's important. But I mean, basically, Mark, I tell people I was stumbling around in the dark looking for the light switch in my underwear for years and not finding either. For years. And I had an amazing therapist. So like that whole therapy piece, I had an amazing therapist. And when I was at my wit's end at one point, I called her and she said to me, Sheila, you can make it through this successfully. And it moved my earth under my feet because I had never even considered that was a possibility. And when I was sitting in that space of all of that trauma and anticipatory grief and, taking care of Grant 24/7, and I couldn't anticipate what getting through this successfully would look like, but I did make it through it successfully. As human as I was, as drunk as I was, as numb as I was. And I want to say that I was blessed to be on the island of Kauai because I had an amazing ohana, which is your family that you choose on the island, right? I had an ohana that was looking out for me and that really took care of me. And if I hadn't built the support systems that I did, including a phenomenal therapist, I would have never made it through to where I am today.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really touching story. And it is moving, just to for you to have such a human experience. I think we're often insulated by things like that. We're insulated from death and insulated from sickness. And you had that in your late 20s. You really had that awakening and having to I imagine cut through all the bullshit in your head and just get down to brass tacks. Absolutely. And just be with basic human life. Like you said, helping the man pee and walk around and yeah.
My friends could be complaining about their husbands with their socks on the floor. And I'm like, I wish my husband could leave his socks on the floor.
Yeah, we should have to take them off for him every time, right? I mean, that's...
Or just take them off and throw them, right?
Yeah.
At one point in time, towards the end of his illness, he was sitting in his recliner and he looked at me and he said, I think that you bit off more than you can chew. And I looked at him and I said, yes, I did, but I'm still wiping your ass.
Yeah, because that's beautiful.
I'm still here wiping your ass and I'm not going anywhere. He tried to push me away. Seriously, 3 months before he died, he told me he was going to divorce me. And I said, you know what, if you can, knock yourself out.
Yeah, if you can.
You have the energy to do that, go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was trying to push me away because he didn't want me to go through his pain with him. He didn't want to be dependent upon me. But I want to tell you, we both help people work through a couple of really major life lessons, in my opinion. He helped me move through my fears of abandonment because my real dad killed himself when I was 5 years old. That's devastating. That, was a foundation from my, formative years, right? And he was leaving me, but loving me and supporting me and not wanting to go. There was a point in time that he was crying at one point, and I said, what's going on? And he's like, I'm not going to be here to protect you anymore. You are going to be dating all these assholes and jerks after I go like you did before you found me. And I'm not going to be able to do anything about it. And I just kind of looked at it and I'm like, okay, well, you're probably right. He was.
Touche. Okay.
He was until I found, I dated good people. Yeah. It wasn't that I dated a lot of jerks, but, no one who was in an emotional capacity to have a serious relationship.
Right. Yeah. No long-term viable candidates,
I wasn't there either.
Yeah. Yeah. You had your own healing to go through.
Yeah, I was attracted to the emotionally unavailable person because I wasn't available either, So maybe it was fun for a while until it wasn't.
Well, so let me ask you, because there's a lot of really great themes that have been brought up by this story. I want to start with like, you called it vanity. And I think a lot of men have this where they don't want to show weakness. And even that last part of the story where we talked about him protecting you and insulating you and not wanting you to feel the pain of his eventual death. I mean, that's, I guess, my imagining, right? He's trying to like protect you. I think a lot of guys do that. And my opinion is it leaves a lot of us really lonely because we don't let people in when we need them. And I think especially women, I think women have way more emotional toughness and endurance than most men. But for whatever reason, right, because of, I don't know, whatever, misogyny or stereotypes, like we try to push the women away in our lives. And it sounds like as a woman, you were there ready to show up, ready to wipe his ass, ready to commit before you were even married, right? Like ready to like walk it to the end. And I don't know. I don't know what the question is, but I guess it's like, what is it like for you as a partner? And what can you tell some of the guys that may be listening that maybe have that pattern of pushing people away, for their own good, or the belief of for their own good?
In really looking at, my experience, Grant would have moments of bringing me close and then pushing me away. So I think that the underlying desire was to be close and to have that close connection and that close relationship with me. So we had some of that. In the moments that he pushed me away, honestly, there was a lot of anger. And the anger piece was Grant was a perfectionist and he was very meticulous about how he wanted things done. And that was in his normal life also. I fell short of that a lot of the time and I wasn't going to be perfect, right? And so he was angry at me a lot, but I think he was also taking out that anger on me because I was safe and because I wasn't going to go anywhere. But he was really conflicted within himself. And after we would have, a blowout yelling and screaming match, which I talk about it in my book, and it's very raw and vulnerable and honest because it needs to be, we would be laughing and hugging each other and, having a smoothie after that, so it was an ebb and a flow, I think, with that. Grant also had some good relationships with other caregivers who were females, and I had to let go of his close relationship with other people, females who may even be beautiful. We had beautiful people in our lives. We had my friend Holly, who was a 6-foot-tall surfer babe, these people are coming in and taking care of it. And I'm like, what planet did I land on that he's got 3 beautiful caregivers, right?
Yeah. Were you envious or were you jealous? Like what was coming up with that?
I'm going to tell you, I was jealous of his sweetness with that. I saw the uglier side of Grant because I was safe. So our friends would see, oh, honey, you look like you're tired today. Maybe you need to take a nap. I didn't get that part, right?
Yeah, I think that's really common. And that's really common in relationships.
Yeah. And so I wasn't jealous from a love relationship perspective, right? I wasn't, I was jealous that he had this closeness with them and not with me. But at the same time, at the end, I was like, he's got to have closeness with somebody. So it may as well be these really good friends of ours that I trust and that I know they love me too. And they're supporting both of us, right? So for me, it wasn't, but if I was one of those really jealous people, I could have really had a hard time.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you were getting closeness, but you were getting the full 360 closeness. Like you said, you were getting the anger, you were getting the depressive days, you were getting the push away, you were getting the raw, unfiltered Grant. while they were getting like, but I think again, a lot of the guys do, me included, we have a persona that is, quote, vulnerable and open, right? But it's not the full us. Like we're still censoring some level of us, which is often the more like violent, aggressive feelings, right? That all guys have to some extent.
I got what his family would get, what his sister got, we had that common experience. But the interesting piece is towards the end, some of his best friends, his guy friends who came out to visit us, he would have angry outbursts in front of them, and they would just say flat out, "Grant, you can't treat your wife like this. Grant, they called him on his shit, really pissed him off, but they were really great friends. And ultimately, love won. And love wins in the end. If you really love somebody and you hold on to that, it won. But not without a lot of anger and a lot of insanity tied to those rough emotions.
If you're enjoying the podcast so far, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us to reach more men and inspire them to become the best versions of themselves. Thank you for your support. And now back to the show. Well, so if you could do it different, or I don't know, maybe like magic wand different, is there anything that could have helped prepare for the eventual loss? And I'm thinking this in terms of, I work with retired men at Men's Therapy Online, and they talk about this a lot, right? They talk about like, what if I leave my wife? She's alone. She won't be able to deal with life without me. I think that's like a really common thing that a lot of men in long-term relationships feel. So I wonder is like, what would have helped prepare you for it, being a widow, or does it just kind of suck no matter what? It probably does to some extent, right?
Well, for me,
always going to be hard.
Doing everything, I was involved in everything. Like we didn't have this separateness that like my husband and I now have, where like he takes care of the bills and the finances and I do this and he does that and I do this, right? We were doing them all together because I needed to do them with him. He couldn't do them on his own. So I want to say I was prepared as I could have possibly been, being independent. He was dependent on me. I was the one who was holding a lot. That's not always the case, right? But I had a lot of codependent issues, right? And so I was going to work through those through therapy as well as through my relationships, which is what I did. From a financial perspective, he was the savvy one. I wasn't. He was doing crazy shit like day trading and stuff when he could, and I was working all this. That was like when it was really hip back then.
Yeah. It was
Still, I don't know.
90s, 2000s, when it was actually viable to some extent. Yeah.
When he died, it was in 1999 to 2000. I lost 40% of our portfolio. How could that have been any better? The relationship could have been stronger with the mainland financial advisor that we had, that he had a relationship with, but I didn't have a relationship with. And that person did not check in with us after he died. And I was in grief and didn't do anything with the money. And we freaking lost $40,000. Now, whether or not we should have moved it anyway, most financial people are going to tell you, don't touch the money. It'll come back. So, don't freak out. Don't touch the money. It'll come back. I don't know. In our special situation, I would have just liked a really strong financial advisor to come in, and that relationship could have been, the introduction could, I knew him, but like that relationship could have been stronger with both spouses instead of just one. And the concerns could have been discussed. That didn't happen at all. And I've got an advisor now. We have a financial advisor that we've talked through all of those things, right? And we also had an estate plan where one of Grant's really good financially feasible friends could have come in and supported me, right? And I want to say it's not because I wasn't capable. I want to say, and it's not because your partners are not capable. Sometimes they might be more capable than you might be. But most situations, a lot of women let the men run that, especially if they're the main financial breadwinner, they're the supportive earner. It just depends on who's the breadwinner and what's happening and who's taking control of the finances. And honestly, sometimes the woman is the breadwinner and the guy is in control of the finances, right? My husband's in the dental business. We have a lot of dentists who are females who their husbands run their offices and they're the ones in charge of everything, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean, it could go either way. But I really think these relationships and knowing that when you're grieving, you are not thinking the same way that you're going to think when you're really on top of things. I mean, I talk about grief brain, and grief brain, you forget stuff, you don't think about stuff, days can go on. I mean, from a therapy perspective, working with people who are grieving, right? But I can say that financial piece is so big. And it's so big because you want to take care of people financially. You may be able to take care of people and set things in place that are going to help support them when emotionally they might not be in a place to support themselves. Or at least that they have the support they need from someone they can trust so that no one takes advantage of them. And I want to say from that perspective, Grant, I need to worry about me getting, really caught up with some con man shyster, but I'm going to tell you, I did have one person who I dated. They're like, so did you inherit a lot of money?
Oh, yeah. Red flag right there.
And I'm like, I had a terminal illness for 5 years. I'm like, I am completely broke, which I wasn't completely broke, but not like I wanted anybody to know that. I mean, but I was floored that somebody could ask that, right? But I want to say you are not away from being preyed upon by other people if you do have a nest egg and some money, which people who are, retired and who have spent their whole lives saving money, then you become worried, is some other guy going to come in and take all of our money?
Yeah, and all of your life work and also...
Or woman or, whoever, I just want to say, I think that is one of the things that was really missing for me. That was a very practical thing that I was not prepared for. It is something, the emotional aspects, you need a really phenomenal therapist. Everybody needs a phenomenal therapist because you are not going to make it through this without one.
Yeah.
We
can make it through life. But
I'll get on my soapbox about that.
It's hard to make it through life without mentorship, right? And sometimes that's a therapist, sometimes that's family, sometimes that's friends, sometimes that's religious leaders, but we need each other, and it's just finding other people that get it and can be that sounding board for you. I want to pivot a little bit when you talked about grief and your therapist said, grieving successfully. And I'm curious what you think she meant by that, what you know by that. Like, what does successful grieving look like in your mind?
Well, so I approached her quite a few years after she said that to me. And I said, I want you to know when you said that to me, it made all the difference in the world. She didn't remember saying that to me.
I've had that experience with clients all the time. My most poignant things, I don't remember saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Nice. Have that all the time.
To me. Okay, people will say, God doesn't give you more than you can, more than you can move through, right? And then I say, well, I question the existence of prisons and mental institutions because I don't think that's true. I was in that phone call ready to check myself into Mahalona Psych Hospital because I was ready to have a nervous breakdown and lose my mind. And when I called her and talked with her on the phone, she told me that it made all the difference in the world for me to actually put one foot in front of the other, to know that I don't have to have it all solved and figured out, but that I have to bring in the support that can help me do that. And that is what I ended up doing, is getting the resources that I needed, finding the people who could take care of and do things that I couldn't do myself. I say, find your most brilliant friend and call them in and just say, I need your help. I need you to help me figure this out. And then step out of the way because they're going to take care of it and help you do it. I mean, this is why I want to say when we're afraid to ask people for help and what we need, I say we have incredibly resourceful family members, friends, people in our lives. And I'm going to say there might be only 2 or 3 that you could actually ask to do something like that, right? That you would actually call and say, I need you right now. I did that with Grant's sister. I said, I need you right now. She was in Minnesota. She had 2 babies. She freaking got care and got on the plane and came out, right?
That's a hero.
I wasn't asking until I needed it. So I want to say that, when people say to you, what do you need? I'm here for you. You just tell them, if you don't know what you need, just say, at some point, I'm really going to need you. And when I call you and I ask for what I need you to be there for me. And that it really is our own responsibility to ask for what we need. And that our friends who are mind readers, they will be priceless in your life whenever you go through a tough time. And we do have some mind reading friends that are phenomenal. I say they're worth their weight in gold. Honor and be grateful for them and hold on to them because they're a rare bird.
Yeah, most people can't read minds. Most people you have to communicate pretty directly with, but they'll do it and they want to do it. It's just they just don't know, right?
Well, they don't know, but you have to look at what people are good at and have them do that, right? Yeah. And so this is my HR brain, right? It's like, get the person who can do the job for the best. So I want to say I'm bringing some strengths and some skills to this, formerly from a professional perspective, right? But it's like, who has the skills to do this? And then you ask them for what you need with the skills to do that.
Yeah.
I just really good at that over 40.
Well, I just want to jump in and say, like, for my generation, it's like, I think a lot of millennials and younger, they see that as like a chore or as like a burden or labor, versus what I see is like, that's where meaning comes from. Like, I imagine, his sister that came in and swooped in and was like, did that heroic action. Like, you will never forget that, right? That's like where real meaning in life comes from, is showing up and doing these heroic actions for the people that you care about. So even though it may feel like a pain in the ass, it's like, do it, right? I mean, I don't know, like that's what gives flavor to your life.
Yeah. Well, I said to a friend of mine who's going through, her husband has cancer, a very aggressive cancer. I said to her, I'm a big ask. You tell me when you need something and I'm a big ask for you, whatever it is, I will do it. And but the thing is sometimes you don't know unless you've been in a situation like that. But I want to say that a lot of people will go dark and quiet because they are terrified to live in that kind of space or that kind of trauma or that kind of grief or problems with people. And that is a part of that dark night of the soul where you're like, holy crap, I thought I could count on these people. And where the hell are they? They're hanging out at the bar, or they're on the golf course, or where are they? No one's calling. Crickets. That's when that's hard. That's hard.
Yeah, like you said, if you've never been through anything or your family hasn't taught emotional intelligence or you haven't been in therapy or whatever, right? Like, these things can feel very terrifying. And there's like an aversion of like, oh no, Sheila's feeling depressed or feeling grieving. Like, she'll figure it out. Like, I don't want to be a problem. She'll figure it out on her own. I'll give her space. But yeah, it's like taking a deep look at that and being like, am I actually doing it for her good, or am I just afraid of the situation? Yeah. And if you're afraid, moving towards it is what makes you stronger, right? Like, that's the thing. That's the direction to move in.
I also want to say, how do we not judge people who can't be there for us? Because that pain and that hurt is there. The opportunity for forgiveness, maybe at some point in time, for people who can't be there, right? You can sit and struggle with that. I mean, you can rewrite your entire contact list going through a situation like this, though I will say that that's a part of that big picture is, and I'm going to tell you, there will be people who show up for you that you don't even know, rather than the people who are your best friends. And I just say, you don't know where it's going to come in, just embrace it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, being a therapist, right, we're all about communication. So I understand that people can't show up. I guess my hope, maybe a magical therapy world, is that there could be a conversation about it, even if it's years down the line. Because I worked with tons of grieving individuals, and they've had people in their lives that have literally said to them, you know what, I didn't show up. I'm sorry, but I was afraid, or I didn't know what to do, or I was lost, or I was confused, or I was really, paralyzed. And that is so healing for those people, because a lot of people in grief, they think it's their fault because they're already in a low place. And if they take it personally, they think it's their fault. It can be something that could be so devastating to a relationship or a friendship. So like owning the fact that owning your experience and being like, yeah, I didn't show up, but I was afraid. It's not about you. That might be all you have to say to really rebuild that bridge in a real way.
Be honest.
Yeah, honesty is the thing. Yeah.
That honesty can get you so far, right? But, I also want to say that holding space for people when you're going through a really tough time, it just kind of, your support comes in different ways. And, moving through all of that can be really challenging. But I think ultimately we are so much stronger than we know that we are when we're really put to the test. That resilience aspect is pretty surprising, right? And so after Grant died, I'm like, I don't think I'm ever getting married again. I'm never going to do this again. Well, I certainly jumped in with both feet again. And you know what? I'm tried, tested, and true. I can do this. It doesn't mean that I don't feel all the pain that goes with it, but I jokingly call myself a professional griever. Malcolm Gladwell, he talks about, I think it's Blink, or it's one of his really awesome books, and he says, you have to do something for 10,000 hours before you become an expert. And that's basically 2,000 hours, which is full-time for 5 years. That's fully competent in a position from an HR perspective, right? But I just say, well, yeah, I've done that. I'm a professional griever. It doesn't mean that I don't feel things. I just know I'm going to come out of it.
Right. You can operate while you're feeling it, and you can work with that energy instead of having it devastate you. I'm curious, is there things that you do or a ritual now that keeps Grant alive or that continues the grieving process? I know some people celebrate the anniversary of the death or the birthday, or they do something during a holiday. I'm curious if you have anything that you actually do. Yeah, some people write a book. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
Some people write a book 20 years later, and he's very present. I hold space for the meaningful and important things. It can be dates. It can be a wedding anniversary. It can be his birthday. It could be the day he dies. And I hold space for very special moments of it. 20 years, from his anniversary date, my husband, Sean, and we went to Secret Beach. I wore a button with a funny face that I had of his put on it. And I went down and I took pictures and I carved his name in the sand. And I did some very special things to me on Secret Beach. And my current husband held space for that. And I want to say that from the moment Sean started dating me, he held this space for Grant and his ghost, whatever that looked like, his memory, his physical presence, his spiritual presence in my life. I do talk about mystical stuff in my book because Grant had a way of being present even from beyond, and some people don't believe that. But for people who have an openness to it, this man would be able to turn on a song on the stereo or the radio and put it full blast when he wanted me to listen to it. The Cure Love Song was the first one. And I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah.
He was able to turn the stereo up.
Yeah.
And he sent me songs and different things like that. And, it's kind of funny because I share that with some of my male clients, right? And they'll even be like, can I tell you what happened to me? That I've never told anybody before. And I'm kind of like, yes, that's really cool, right?
I love paranormal stuff. It's really common. Almost everybody has a story with something.
Well,
yeah.
Yes. And whether it's cardinals come to visit me or hawks, I see hawks, or my spouse, a card fell out of the closet that was just what I needed to see in writing that day, right? I have heard so many things, and is it synchronicities, whatever. I don't care what you want to call it. I think we still have that bond and that connection with that person. Now, the funny thing is that now Grant would just say, Grant's my best friend on the other side, and I've got a husband here, right? And my best friend on this side. And Grant will say, good luck, Sean, she's yours now. And good luck taking care of that. But with Sean, just holding space he just had that ability from when I met him. And I want to say not everyone can do that, but if you are dating again after a death or a divorce is a totally different thing. And I want to say sometimes I think it's harder than a death because that person's still alive and you have whatever dynamic you have with them.
It's usually co-parenting or, they're in your life to some extent.
Sometimes it can be a very painful relationship too. When someone dies, you just don't have what you want with them anymore in a physical place, right? But I want to say that we can bring that forward. We can continue to have whatever relationship that we want to have, whether it's a ritual, whatever it is that we want to have experience, that can be close to our heart, or we can share it, or we don't have to share it with anybody. And just know that if you had a close relationship and connection with that person, they're going to connect with you. And we don't know what that looks like. So, I talk about different dreams that I've had where it was very real. I've talked about experiences. He called me on the phone. That's a weird thing. And I get static in the background every time I tell somebody that he calls me on the phone. It was so weird. But, I think that one of my advanced readers said to me, well, my sister died 6 months ago. I haven't had any experience. So, maybe some people don't have that experience. And I said, well, it doesn't mean you won't, because this is 5 dreams over 25 years, right? Like this is, these events. And so that's why my book is called Over the Rainbow. And I call these rainbows because it's how rainbows show up. You don't expect them. They just reveal themselves, right? And this is how, you might connect with messages, or how you might connect with memories or dreams or different things like that they just kind of show up out of the blue. And it becomes kind of a little gift in some ways, right?
Yeah, I think it could be an invitation into that more like intuitive spiritual way of being. It's just being open and just like being willing to see that rainbow, right? They're willing to be surprised, or willing to make meaning out of seeing that bird that flies across your vision, or the rabbit that like shouldn't be there at this time of year, just like really just like noticing things. I think opening up perception, you start to notice all these different, like I said, synchronicities or omens or. Right?
Yeah. And I want to say, my husband, Sean, he's a real badass. He's a former, he's a retired firefighter, EMT, former military. He's a very physical kind of a guy. And, and he doesn't poo-poo any of that. And I said, I'm going really woo-woo in this book. And he's like, okay, as long as you're not levitating down the hallway, I think
as long as you're not putting a spell on me, fine.
But I want to say, Sean's been on the front end of death, right? Like Sean has grabbed people and run out of burning buildings, right? Like, Sean has been there in accidents. So like, he's in touch with this in a totally different way, but in a very physical way, right? And so I want to say that depending on what people have done professionally, they might be connected in different kinds of ways. And, maybe they're not as outwardly open, but maybe they're even a little more inwardly open, even if they don't talk about it. Because talking about it can be challenging, right? I had to work through all that vulnerability in my book. I'm like, I am a well-respected professional career coach and an HR consultant. And, can I go woo-woo in this book? And what are people going to think about me? And oh my gosh, no one said anything about it. Actually, people have said more positive things about it than anything else.
Yeah. Like when you're open and raw enough, it usually hits something in people, as we're moving towards the end, I want to ask kind of a final question. How do you get back on the horse? Like you were alluding to this, after you suffer a grief or you get divorced or even a breakup, I mean, call that different levels, right? Like, how do you open your heart again? Because I've seen so many guys, and I think it's really common that like once we get stabbed in that deep place, we build a wall, and it can be very difficult to ever let people into that place again.
Slowly. I mean, some people are very trustworthy and trusting, and I'll trust you until I'm burned. Some people are like, I'll build that trust slowly over time. And maybe it is about slowly building that trust over time and letting people in a little bit at a time, being friends with somebody, finding companionship with groups and or different people, and opening yourself up to some different experiences. That worked for me. Of course, I was more dysfunctional, like drinking and numbing myself and dating people and sleeping with people and whatever. I had to work through whatever I needed to. But when I finally got serious, it was really that I wanted somebody that could hold that space with me, and that I was no longer going to entertain being with people who could not be responsible, who couldn't call me back, who couldn't do what they said they were going to do. And I think that, I cut those off sooner rather than later. And that's really the key. It's like you just really have to trust that people are going to show you who they are, and you have to pay attention the first time. And I had to, in getting sober, right, I had to cut a lot of people out of my life that were just the partying, good, time people. And I had to really focus on the people that were really there to have very honest and vulnerable relationships. And I had to be ready for that myself, working with my therapist, though, before I could actually attract those people and bring them in.
So yeah, I'm just hearing like, open your eyes, open your heart, like see people for who they are. And then unless you like allow yourself to be messy, again, I think especially for men, there's so much this thing of like, we have to get over grief. We have to stuff it down. We have to get back to work as soon as possible. Once your, FMLA leave is over, you should be totally fine. Right. Like, but it's a lifelong process, especially if it was someone that was so close to you.
I want to say that historically, research wise, men tend to replace more quickly than women do, within sometimes 2 years from losing somebody. I want to say if you're a relationship person, you're going to find another really awesome person. And it doesn't mean that your relationship wasn't close with the other. There's enough love in our hearts for everybody. It's just how you want to do relationship differently, I think, moving forward, learning from that experience.
I think that's a key one, is different. Like, not better or worse, but different. Because I see a lot of guys that also grieve that want to just replace and have the same relationship, right? Even date someone who maybe looks similar or acts similar or from the same part of the world. Yeah, right? Like, but I do think it's like allowing that like something different might form. And it doesn't mean that it's better or it's dishonoring the memory of your person that you've lost, but it's just different, right? So like letting it be different, letting it be something new instead of trying to fit it into that mold of what didn't get completed.
But something so funny said, imagine that you have 200 holes in your heart. Your beloved filled 150 of them. You find a new person, maybe they fill 175, but they're different. Maybe it's 125, but they're different. Or 150, but they're different, right? And so I think, we're just going to attract that person that we are at that time, from that mirrored perspective. If we're healthy, perhaps we'll attract that healthier person. If we're not as healthy, we're going to attract that perhaps not as healthy person. I think that we all have patterns and things that we need to work through over time as well, that might even be separate from that grief process. But we can have really healthy, amazing relationships and connections with people when we do the work on ourselves and we
I think that's so true. I think like attracts like, and like the best thing someone can do to attract a higher value partner, if they want to see it that way, is to work on themselves. Because if you don't have anything to offer either, right, you're going to end up with people kind of in the same boat or playing out your old traumas from childhood, right, and just sort of repeating old mistakes over and over again because the original wound didn't get healed. So Sheila, we got to wrap up here. This was a really good conversation, but I'm curious, where can people learn more about you, find you online, or where can they get the book?
Yeah. Transitions with an S, coaching services with an S.com. I offer complimentary consults if people want to talk with me, whether it's a professional aspect or anything differently. I seem to connect well with people from that professional place initially. And I do everything from, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, to promotability, to helping you excel in your role and your job. So from that coaching perspective, it's really about supporting you in that meaningful purpose and moving forward. And from that great place, it's just about taking care of yourself. So I work with therapists, helping people support them and moving forward as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So listeners, we'll have a link to her website in the show notes. We'll also have a link to the book you can get on Amazon called Over the Rainbow if you're interested in learning more about the story and really getting that firsthand account. And Sheila, again, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our time together today. Thank you.
That's great. Great conversation. And listeners, please.
Audience.
Yeah. Like, share, subscribe, pass it on if there's someone in your life that you know that has been through a loss or is with somebody who's in a similar situation to Sheila and Grant. They probably need to hear these words so they're not alone. So please pass on this episode to somebody if you feel like it would really make a difference in their life. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week, another episode of the Men's Therapy Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. And don't forget to visit menstherapy.online to learn more about the work that we are doing to support and inspire men. Until next time, keep moving forward.